And now, after over a decade of anticipation, we arrive at Test Drive Unlimited Solar Crown. Set in the vibrant streets of Hong Kong, it promised to bring back the freedom, luxury, and open-world exploration that made its predecessors iconic. But what was once a mark of innovation now feels like a step back. Instead of pushing the boundaries, Solar Crown struggles to capture the magic that made this series legendary. I am the Jigsaw. Thank you for joining me in another review. But first things first, let's talk about what I consider the strongest positive aspect of Test Drive Unlimited Solar Crown. This might be controversial because, from what I've seen on social media, many players aren't fond of it, but to me it's a game changer. In Solar Crown, cars don't just fall from the sky. You have to invest hours of grinding to earn them. This contrasts sharply with games like Forza Horizon, where you might hit a rock and suddenly get a free car. In those games, you get zero sense of accomplishment. The cars you acquire don't feel valuable because they cost you nothing, and you end up switching cars every few minutes without really getting attached. The developers aim to create a wow factor. When players see someone with a limited edition Ferrari, for example, they should know that player worked hard to get it. Unfortunately, you rarely see other players in the city, and even when you do, their cars might just disappear before your eyes, but we'll get into that later. Now, let's shift gears and dive into where Solar Crown falls short. While the grind to earn cars might be a highlight for some, there are significant issues that can't be overlooked. These include a lack of meaningful interactions with other players, frustrating technical glitches that disrupt the experience, and perhaps the most glaring problem of all, the game's optimization and performance issues. One major issue with Solar Crown is the lack of meaningful interactions with other players. The game promised a vibrant online community, but in reality, it often feels deserted. When you start an online race, it's common to find that no one joins or shows up, leaving you racing alone. This lack of participation and engagement undermines the social aspect that was a key feature in previous titles, leaving players feeling isolated in an otherwise expansive world. Another significant problem is the frustrating visual glitches and frequent crashes that disrupt the experience. Players often encounter issues like cars clipping through objects or graphical distortions, which break immersion and make the game look unpolished. The most aggravating problem, however, is when the game crashes in the middle of a race, forcing you to restart from the beginning. These issues not only hinder gameplay, but also significantly impact the overall enjoyment, turning what should be an exhilarating experience into a frustrating ordeal. Another drawback is the repetitive sound effect that plays whenever you hit anything in the game. Instead of providing unique and realistic audio cues for different types of collisions, the game uses the same generic sound for every impact. This makes the car feel like it's just a giant bumper, rather than a detailed and dynamic vehicle. The lack of variety in collision sounds breaks immersion and reduces the overall realism of the driving experience. Now let's talk about the dinosaur in the room, the graphics and optimization. This is your lobby. Here you can already tell the graphics are notably underwhelming for a 2024 release. The visuals lack detail and depth, making the environment feel flat and uninspired, as if it's missing that extra touch of polish. Additionally, the character movement is poorly executed. Characters seem to slide around with no real sense of weight or limb movement, giving them a disjointed, almost robotic appearance. As you step out of the hotel and get into your car, that's when the real problems start. I'm running the game on a high-end setup with an NVIDIA 3080, a Ryzen 9 5900X, and 64 gigabytes of RAM, with the graphics set to mid-high. Despite this configuration, the performance is disappointing, and the visual fidelity looks outdated. The textures are often blurry, and the environments lack detail. The city doesn't look alive and all feel scripted, and not a random, always in movement organism, which is particularly jarring given the high system specs. In the top right corner of the screen, You can see the frame rates, which drop significantly despite the mid-range graphics settings. While the lighting effects, including neon lights, do look impressive, I have this crazy idea that feels like ray tracing is on, and you can't turn it off in the options. This would explain a lot, but regardless, the game really does have significant optimization issues that affect the overall experience. Let's make a comparison with Forza Horizon 3 that was released 8 years ago in 2016. Can you feel the difference in the game's smoothness and the graphics fidelity? And I will remind you again, this was released 8 years ago. The game progression doesn't feel natural and is far from a true car RPG experience. There are very few cutscenes and story elements that influence how the game evolves, making it hard to follow and understand where to go next when unlocking new areas. Meeting points often feel empty, and the gameplay can be clunky. The car's reaction to the same events during races isn't consistent, and AI cars don't seem to be affected by collisions with objects, unlike the player's car. Additionally, while the engine sounds of other cars are impressive, they are so loud that you have to lower their volume in the options just to hear your own engine, which is crucial if you're using manual shifting. This was a long-awaited title for test drive fans, and I'm one of them. I've played almost all the test drive games on release, from the Commodore Amiga to PlayStation 1 and 2, and later on PC. The developers had big shoes to fill, and they completely failed. Nothing in this game does justice to or lives up to the standard of its predecessors, despite having a 13-year gap between releases. Many car games were released in the meantime, big titles like Forza Horizon, The Crew, and more recently, Need for Speed Unbound. Each of these games has its strengths and weaknesses, from which these developers should have learned. They had a foundation to build on, and years of mistakes from other studios to avoid. Instead, it feels like they produced a poor knockoff of Forza Horizon and a distant imitation of Need for Speed Unbound's RPG aspects and storytelling. There are more concerning problems. They knew exactly how the game performed before its release. Does anyone really believe they weren't aware of these issues? If you think otherwise, just tell me in the comments. Jigsaw, you must be drunk, they didn't know. Maybe there's a reason I'm missing, but I doubt it. It seems they expected the game to be dead on arrival and planned to fix some issues later. However, some of Solar Crown's problems are not fixable, and even those that are, like performance and optimization, will come too late. We live in an era where new releases come out daily, making it hard for people to return to a game with such a poor launch and negative indicators. The developers should have known better. It's with sadness that I say all this because, though I'm not usually nostalgic for old titles, this is one of the few I was. It has completely disappointed my expectations. The game is not worth your time or money. Just wait for a miracle to make it decent, or, well, that's up to you. Thank you for watching, and please don't be upset if you disagree with my views. We all have different perspectives and opinions. However, some points are based on facts, and highlighting these will assist the developers in creating a better game for everyone. If you enjoyed the review, feel free to leave a like or even subscribe to the channel. I always encourage feedback in the comments, and I'll do my best to respond to everyone. See you in the next one.